Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on artificial intelligence and international cultural relations, Blessing Our Curse. And thank you very much for joining us. So to start off with, I'm going to pass over to Odila Tribel, who is Head of Dialogue and Research, Culture and Foreign Policy at IFA, Institute for Foreign Cultural Relations. And following that, we'll hear a presentation from Octavio Kulesz, who is the author of the report, and we'll have a discussion with Martin Rauchbauer and Amy Sample-Ward. So firstly, over to you, Odila Tribel.
Thank you very much, Luba. Dear distinguished guests, dear participants, dear audience, welcome to this webinar that serves at the same time as the launch of the IFA study, Artificial Intelligence and International Cultural Relations, Challenges and Opportunities for Cross-Sector Collaboration by Octavio Kulesz. It is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of IFA and especially the Dialogue and Research team. IFA stands for Institut für Auslandsbeziehungen. Our institute promotes a peaceful and enriching coexistence between people and cultures worldwide. IFA supports artistic and cultural exchange in exhibition, dialogue, and conference programs. And it acts as a center of excellence for international cultural relations as it provides research and evidence-based information for the sector of international cultural relations. Why did we initiate this study? What is at stake for international cultural relations? The integration of artificial intelligence technology has profoundly transformed multiple dimensions of social life on a global scale. I'm sure you all are aware of it. Today, we raise the question about this transformation that are specifically linked to the socio-political sphere of culture and foreign relations. Artificial intelligence has an impact on nearly every aspect of international cultural relations. In the study, Octavio Kulesz on the one hand outlines possible ways in which AI technologies can boost creative potential in art and culture and support, for example, translation tools that may facilitate international cooperation. However, the focus lies on the challenges arising as a result of AI for the protection of human rights and equality at the international level. Points to be raised here are cybersecurity and data protection risks to democracy, global and north and south divides, a geopolitical undercurrent in the technological race of global superpowers, a power concentration on private companies that require tech diplomacy. Specifically, cultural diversity and exchanges are challenged by non-inclusive content selection systems that might deepen further global divides. Last not least, a minority's mighty reductionist technological worldview might need to be addressed as such at what it is and be countered by powerful cultural refutations. So we need to discuss what challenges and opportunities does AI present for freedom of expression, privacy, and cultural diversity in an international context. What role do stakeholders such as public institutions, cultural organizations, technology companies, and civil society play in shaping these dynamics? AI is already exacerbating disparities and affecting the integrity of information. This is occurring amidst escalating geopolitical competition and a global search for a new technological governance. Institutions engaged in international cultural relations must strategically contribute to the ethical and responsible development and regulation of AI. Moreover, as Octavio states, these institutions should also actively engage in reshaping the narratives surrounding it, which ultimately influence the policies implemented in this crucial field. This publication is right on time. In September of this year, the UN Summit of the Future will release the Global Digital Compact that is expected to outline shared principles for an open, free, and secure digital future for all. To quote Octavio Kulesz again, AI, as any other technological system, maybe even more than others, cannot adequately guarantee peace, safety, or fairness by itself. The human dimension of this technological shift needs to be brought attention of the international cultural relation actors. It is us to shape its possible geopolitical, cultural, and societal impact in this direction. Now, I thank Octavio Kulesz, Director of Teseo and expert of IFAD's research program, Culture and Foreign Policy, for his dedication to and careful and critical reflection of this crucial technological development. Moreover, last not least, for his excellent analysis on the potential impact of AI to international cultural relations specifically. I thank also my colleagues in the team, Sarah Wiedmeier and Ivana Putri, to making this publication and this launch today possible. And now, I wish us all an informative and inspirational discussion and head over to our moderator, Luba Elliott.
Thank you so much, Ojila Drivel, for the welcome. I think it was kind of fantastic to hear about about the report. And next in our webinar, I'm going to hand over to Octavio Kulesz, who will give a 10-minute presentation about the report. And before I do that, I will just read a short bio of Octavio, so you know the perspective he's coming from. So Octavio Kulesz is a philosopher, digital publisher, director of Teseo, expert of IFA's research program, Culture and Foreign Policy. Kulesz collaborates with international organizations, including UNESCO, Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, IFACA, and the International Alliance of Independent Publishers. His research focuses on issues related to digital culture and artificial intelligence, and some of his articles, such as Culture, Platforms and Machines in UNESCO 2018, precisely anticipated the contemporary challenges associated with the impact of generative AI on the cultural sectors by over 5 years. So now, Octavio, would be delighted to hear from you about the report.
Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. I would like to thank the whole IFA team, especially Sarah, Ivana, and Odila for this amazing opportunity. And also, I would like to thank Martin, Amy, and Luba again for accepting the invitation to be part of the panel today. So I will share my screen. So artificial intelligence and international cultural relations. As we know, in the last few years, artificial intelligence has started to transform almost every aspect of our social lives and our lives in general. And in the field of culture, and specifically in the field of international cultural relations, or ICR, this impact is very clear. Indeed, if we define ICR as the reciprocal transnational interactions between two or more cultures, encompassing a range of activities conducted by state and or non-state actors within the space of culture and civil society, it is really difficult to think of an aspect of ICR that has not been influenced by AI. Especially, let's think, for example, about languages, arts and culture, the information environment, communications, and even geopolitics. All these dimensions have been transformed by AI in the last few years. However, is it possible to think of the inverse impact? That is to say, can ICR have an influence on AI? I believe, yes, it is possible to think of such impact, because AI is a very transnational field where developers, startups, researchers work and they form an international community. The very research in AI is carried out with international collaborations of all sorts between universities, governments, etc. In order to deliver new AI regulations, you also need cooperation and mutual understanding. And we also have this fourth element that, in my opinion, is absolutely crucial, which is the group of narratives, imaginaries, and metaphors employed as a symbolic framework to understand how we work with AI. And this all comes from culture, and specifically from international cultural relations. So we should acknowledge that the link between AI and ICR, this interaction is much more complex than we usually think. it's multidimensional, and it's not unidirectional. It goes in both directions. So having this in mind, please let me briefly go through each chapter of the report, which is in a way, at least the first 6 chapters. It's a sort of journey through the AI world from the perspective of ICR, or from the perspective of an ICR actor. So we will see some of the basic features and challenges of the AI systems. We will dig deeper into languages and AI, creative sector, the information environment, the tech titans, and the geopolitics of AI. These are the 6 first chapters. The 7th chapter is a sort of meta chapter where I try to engage in a conversation with different experts coming from ICR to see more specifically what their challenges are, what are the opportunities they see in this very, very dynamic scenario. And finally, in the conclusion and in the recommendation section, I attempted to share some ideas for the future. So I will start with the chapter devoted to AI systems. This is a very quick overview. You will see in the chapter of the main models and the main problems we find. So I propose I use a couple of definitions of AI. It's not always simple to define it. I resorted to the definition by UNESCO and another one coming from Google, just to have one public sector or multilateral organization on the one hand and another private actor on the other hand. Even if AI is much more than generative AI, I focused mainly on generative AI, especially large language models, diffusion models, and other very recently relatively new technologies, to show some of their challenges, like the hallucinations problems, where generative AI start to create incorrect content. Their deep lack of understanding, because they have been called, especially the large language models, they are considered to be stochastic parrots. They talk and talk and talk, but they don't really grasp the meaning of what they say. The risk of the model collapse, where when an AI model is fed with synthetic content, that is to say, content that has been generated by another AI, the model simply collapses. The problem of biases, value conflict, and the staggering environmental impact, which is undeniable. All these problems have led to the emergence of new fields in AI. It's AI ethics, and another field but related to AI ethics, which is AI safety. In the second chapter, I propose to deal with the problem of languages and to see how we also face a number of problems here, because English, as you know, is the lingua franca of not just business, but also in tech and scientific research. And this poses a number of problems that we won't have the time now to go in depth, but we can discuss it later, maybe. It's not just English. English is a super high resource language. We have a lot of high quality data sets in English. There are other high resource languages below English, such as Spanish, Chinese, French, Japanese, and a few others, but the rest are low resource languages. So there are big imbalances in terms of languages. And this poses a number of risks, social technical risks, among which we could mention the risk of language erasure, the extinction of several hundreds of languages. But despite all the difficulties, there are some interesting initiatives at the local level working at this intersection of AI and languages. Third chapter, AI in the creative sectors. Well, I'm sure you know, you have read a lot about this in the media or different papers, the huge impact of AI systems on the creative sectors, the arts and cultural sectors. There are many opportunities for visual arts, music, publishing, audiovisual, video games, of course, but there are many, many, many problems. For example, the opacity. If we think of AI in general, the opacity of recommendation algorithms, who is deciding what we see in our feed, in our social media platforms, accounts, in e-commerce platforms, etc. It's an algorithm that runs with AI. In generative AI, data sets are not always high quality, and this poses a problem in terms of the low quality of the output, the outcome of these systems. So what is the quality of the novels that are being created now, or the short stories that are being created and that are flooding Amazon Kindle platform? Intellectual property and copyright specifically are another big issue, because in these machine learning or deep learning systems, you need to feed or to train the machine with a huge amount of data. And in most cases, the large AI companies have not paid attention to who was the owner of that data. So artists and other creators are generally not being recognized or not being compensated for the use of their works to train AI systems. And we are already seeing this, and I mentioned a few figures in the report. There is a very concerning job loss in the cultural and creative industries happening right now, especially among freelancers. For the navigating the information environment, we are witnessing the proliferation of synthetic content everywhere. The web is being polluted with all sorts of misinformation, biased information, and also there are disinformation and manipulation techniques to generate confusion among the public. So this is a very, very worrying trend. Social media platforms are playing a very ambiguous role, because they, on the one hand, they claim to have introduced technical measures to stop or to mitigate the problem of misinformation or deepfakes, but at the same time, the same media platform are firing or dismantling their content moderation teams, so which is a big contradiction. We are also entering a new era of searching. The search engines will soon change. They have already started with the change, but the search will be a generative search experience. So and maybe you have already seen this in your Google accounts, or whenever you search for a term. This is not happening in all the countries. Some countries are still in beta version, but eventually what we will see is that the search engine will deliver a different result to every individual. So it's, in a way, it's the end of the notion of a shared culture. And censorship is a clear issue here, because censorship techniques are advancing quite rapidly. They are becoming more developed. And in many countries, censorship doesn't only deal with the outcome, the output of the AI system, but also with the input. So in China, many of the platforms that use AI, generative AI, they are feeding those systems with curated data sets. Curated means in this case, censored, monitored, because it's not the same when you feed a system with Wikipedia or another data set. This is not the same as when you feed the system with Baidu's Baike encyclopedia or other data sets. Fifth chapter, this is related to the tech titans, their ambitions and imaginaries. I think it's very, very, very important to see and to understand how they think, who the main actors are, and to see that behind the main AI companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, Inflection, Mistral in France, Aleph Alpha, and many others, in general, behind them, it's usually the large tech companies. So the usual Microsoft, Google, Amazon, etc. And there is a lot of, let's say, homogeneity or a blatant lack of diversity among the working teams in these AI companies. And the risk here by the very presence of large tech companies that are becoming even larger, is that we are going towards, this is leading us towards monopolization and power concentration in the hands of very, very few people. Now, in terms of imaginaries and ideologies or doctrines, it's interesting to see that most, or many, let's say, many of the tech entrepreneurs, especially in Silicon Valley, tend to think technology in terms of solutionism and determinism. So they are, not everyone, of course, but the big trend is techno-solutionism, meaning that any social problem could be solved with technology, and techno-determinism, meaning that technology is the main force in history or in society. This has led to the emergence of veritable, I don't know if we could describe them as sects, but almost like groups and subgroups, tribes fighting one with each other. So we have the doomers who believe that superintelligence will control humanity, and so we have to slow down. And then we have on the other side, we have accelerationists saying that AI, we should move forward and go faster because we will control the universe with these technologies, especially with AI. This is a very strange debate, and so you will find several quotations in the report. And there are other related doctrines such as transhumanism, effective altruism, and long-termism, which form a very peculiar ecosystem that doesn't reflect the cultural mindset of the rest of the world. So I think this is an important issue. And the sixth chapter has to do with geopolitics. So there are three big digital empires, to employ the expression coined by Anu Bradford. And she says that the three digital empires are first the US, market-driven, then China, state-driven, and the EU, rights-driven. Of course, it's more complicated than that, but let's agree on the fact that these are the three hubs in the world in terms of AI. There are other relevant players such as the UK, Japan, South Korea, Canada, and some others. But the Global South runs the risk in this context of being left aside and becoming, as some analysts say, like being trapped in a sort of neo-colonial logic and being like vassal states. So this is a very big risk because in many countries in Latin America, in Africa, in different regions in Asia, most countries don't have the infrastructure and the critical mass to reach the same levels as the countries of the other digital empires. But anyway, we have witnessed in the last few years the emergence of global frameworks. So the first truly global framework for AI is the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI that was adopted by all member states at UNESCO, almost 200 member states, in late 2021. And another important step is the UN resolution from last March on safe, secure, and trustworthy AI. This seventh chapter, working in ICR in the age of AI, well, it's a sort of conversation with different experts, and that they point out several problems. It's true that there have been some interesting projects at the intersection of AI and ICR, but we need, as they say, we need more information, we need more skills, collaborations, and we need to understand better AI as a tool for ICR, especially to understand better its limitations, and also to invest more in this field of narratives, metaphors, and imaginaries. So, to conclude, it's clear that the interaction between AI and ICR is very complex, very rich, and multidimensional. And a few recommendations for the future: you will be able to find details in the report. It's, first of all, training. We need more AI literacy among all stakeholders. We need more collaborations. We need more impact on policies. ICR institutions need to have more impact on national AI strategies. This is essential. We need to foster new debates and to challenge the dominant narratives on AI. We also need to have more impact on AI development and deployment. And finally, we should foster new approaches, especially moving away from imposing top-down solutions, which is very common, and we need to invest more in bottom-up and collaborative and co-construction approaches. So that's it. Thank you very much. I hope you will find the report useful and interesting, and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Octavio, for such a wonderfully thorough presentation. It's a really great summary of the report, and yeah, I can't wait to hear what Martin and Amy kind of have to respond to this and to our discussion. So now I'm going to say a few words about Martin Rauchbauer and then invite him to present sort of his perspective as a response. So Martin Rauchbauer is a senior Austrian diplomat and a tech governance expert, and served for 2 years as Austria's first tech ambassador to Silicon Valley, and more than 5 years as head of Open Austria and Austrian consul in San Francisco. His areas of responsibility included transatlantic tech diplomacy and digital human rights, as well as the development of digital humanism as a strategic focus of Austrian foreign policy. Martin Rauchbauer is co-founder of Open Austria's Art and Tech Lab and the European Art and Tech and Policy Initiative, The Grid. So over to you, Martin.
Oh, thank you so much, Luba, and really congratulations to IFA and in particular to Octavio on this really excellent report on artificial intelligence and international cultural relations. As you mentioned in the kind introduction, my take on it is really informed by my geographic proximity in my professional life over the last, I would say, 8 years in Silicon Valley in the San Francisco Bay Area. And what I really like about the report, which includes many references to the work of cultural mediators in the San Francisco Bay Area, is the big picture approach to artificial intelligence, which often is lacking in when we analyze AI as a tool, and also when we analyze AI and its impact on our society. The big picture that I'm talking about is the geopolitical context in which AI is transforming not only our lives and our societies, but also the international system. And there's questions of power, there are questions of control that, of course, we need to negotiate, and we need to negotiate in a equitable and diverse fashion. So I really like the big picture approach of this report. I think that this report gives an excellent, very comprehensive and concise overview of what the current state of AI is, in particular since the advent of generative AI. Explains very well the foundational models, and also points to something that is really often overlooked. It is not only that AI impacts our culture, like it impacts only so many other things, but that culture, which is ultimately reflects our different values, our different beliefs, our different belief systems, is at the basis of artificial intelligence itself. It informs the outcomes, it informs the inputs, the data sets, which is really, really crucial, not only when we want to shape artificial intelligence. And we often we understand that there are harms and risks on our rights and on human rights in particular. I think there have been now, in the last years, responses coming from many states, in particular the European Union, but also other states around the world, in order to regulate AI and regulate some of the risks and harms involved in AI. But what is often absent is understanding the impact that this new reality created by largely generative AI is having on our culture and on our cultural diversity, or the lack of it. So I really like that about an analytic part of the report. And I also really enjoyed looking at the emphasis of the report in terms of its recommendation, pointing out that cultural mediators, the people engaged in international cultural relations, really need to engage in training and education, need to get up to speed, and that's a continuing process because of the rapid changing environment of artificial intelligence. Also, this emphasis on putting these developments in a geopolitical context. This is something that I have personally been involved with, the Tech Diplomacy Network that we founded among diplomats in the Bay Area last year, and have really seen the different perspectives of many countries, of many civil society representatives, and also of many cultural sector activists and participants, artists, creative people, when it comes to this geopolitical context of artificial intelligence. I really appreciated also the emphasis on cultural diversity, and just thinking about language and generative AI, it obviously points to the dominance of the English language, and what that, of course, language is a main determinator of cultures. What that, of course, then means for other languages, for other cultures, is obvious. There are opportunities in AI for cultural diversity as well, not only challenges, and the report mentions that. And then lastly, the emphasis on collaboration. Many countries, many actors, many institutions in the past have put an emphasis on the competitive element of AI. And when we talk about the US, China, EU competition in artificial intelligence, we often overlook that some of the challenges of artificial intelligence are common for all humankind, and therefore collaboration is the way to go. And we have seen some positive elements in the San Francisco Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, but around the world as well, where actually, despite many ideological differences, geopolitical rivalries, countries have come together and seen and seeked common ground. What I want to end with is to say that ultimately international cultural relations is about the interchange between cultures, as was mentioned, but it is also paying tribute to what artists care for. I also run now in California an artists residency where we have artists from around the world coming to Silicon Valley from all disciplines. And what I see is what artists care about, and there is an increasing emphasis on collaboration as well. Collaboration between artists, but also interdisciplinary collaboration between artists, scientists, even artists and technologists, and also artists and non-human actors. And that's what I would like to put maybe the hopeful end that we can see in artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a tool, but it is not only a tool. It's also almost an actor itself. And therefore, we as people who care for the arts, that care for the creative sector, need to look at what artists really do with these new tools, with this new reality, and put the emphasis on co-creation and collaboration, whereby not only artists use AI as a tool for creative outcomes, but also where they shape those very tools, and they're able to do that. They make the right questions that sometimes technologies forget to ask. Shape those new tools shape those new realities, and also come up with interesting questions that are important and universal for humanity, such as climate change, such as the environmental impact, such as this new kind of forms of agency that we see in artificial intelligence. And therefore, I would also encourage international cultural relations actors to invest in projects that work on collaboration and co-creation. So big kudos to this report. I think it's a very helpful, practical tool for all practitioners, both of tech diplomacy as well as cultural diplomacy and international cultural relations. And I think it is been published at a very timely moment.
Thank you very much, Martin. It definitely feels to me that collaboration is the way forward between countries, organizations, human and non-human entities. And yeah, now I would like to hand over to Amy Sample-Ward to present their perspective on the topic. And before I do that, again, just a few words about Amy. Amy Sample-Ward is CEO of NTEN, a non-profit organization creating a world where missions and movements are more successful through the skillful and equitable use of technology. Amy Ward is a global public speaker, author of 3 books, and a regular contributor to sector-wide podcasts and publications. The latest book, The Tech That Comes Next, co-authored with Afua Bruce, addresses the opportunities for changemakers, technologists, philanthropists, and policymakers to build an equitable world with technology. Amy Ward was a Richard von Weizsäcker Fellow at the Robert Bosch Academy in Berlin. Now, over to you, Amy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. There's so much to say or share after everything already. So I'm going to try to keep it brief because I know there's questions and folks want to dig into some conversation. I did hear both and reading the report and then just sitting with what both Octavio and Martin have said today. There's a few words that kept coming out explicitly said as these words, and also just the feeling of these, and that's power and trust and accountability. And I wanted to offer a framework for having this conversation that supports everybody, regardless of where you live, what you might do for work, what your relationship to AI may be, and map those words or ideas into that framework. So I can put this in the chat if I can find where the chat is now. But just if you'd like to see it on your own screen, but this framework was created from a diverse community of practitioners and is totally free to use. Please use it however you'd like. But I just, like I said, wanted to map those words I'm hearing in the report and hearing in this conversation to this framework. So the first one is trust. We've talked in the report at length about AI breaking trust, supporting trust building. I think a core component of cultural relations is really supporting trust-based conversations across difference, and that trust we see in this impact area. So is that trust gained or lost between individuals? Is it between groups, communities, organizations, entities, or even across systems, whether those systems are within a community of practice or systems across states? So thinking about AI in this way lets us say, who is trusted to build it? Who's trusted to contribute? Who's trusted to use it? And how are we supporting or investing in that trust building, right? The next piece that's come up so much in conversation already today is power. And we see that in this intervention layer on the left. So whether that power is known or you are harnessing some power in community, but is there power to influence the design of a policy, influence the design of a model, influence the design of a data set? Maybe it's developing mechanisms for transparency, for accountability back to that community, right? There are layers of power for us as individuals to use or not use, to contribute, not contribute, etc. But also for communities to work together, for groups, for organizations to lead or galvanize community to support that development, etc. And then finally, accountability, which is, of course, in the top assessment layer. And I think so much of this conversation is trying to acknowledge the lack currently of accountability and thinking about the power hoarding done by these kind of tech giants as the language of the report. And instead of saying, how do we pull some of that away, we say, well, why don't we intentionally concentrate that accountability and that power where we want it in community? So when we think about accountability, both for what goes into these AI systems and what comes out of them, saying, let's concentrate that power with community so that they are first and foremost in control of whether their language, their content, their art, whatever, what was part of the inputs. And then again, accountability to say, are these outputs adequate? Are they supporting trust? Are they supporting us in the goals that we have? So I'll stop there and stop sharing, but I just thought it was a helpful place maybe to open for conversation where we could all be using similar language and speaking to similar value systems here.
Thank you so much to Amy for sharing the framework. I think that's kind of super useful to see how you can have different areas and the interaction between them. And yeah, I think we will all find that a very useful tool. And yeah, so for the remaining 15 or 20 minutes, we're gonna have a little bit of discussion. And I think I will actually start with the question we've been receiving from the audience. And I think the first one we got was, how do you think international cultural relations can actually impact the development of AI? Impact as in not only talk about it. So yeah, if anybody, Octavio, Martin, or Amy, either of you has any thoughts there, that would be great if you could share them.
Yes, well, thank you very much for the question. I think if we take into account the small diagrams that I showed at the beginning of my presentation, like having on the one hand AI and then ICR, the impact of AI on ICR means that there are many challenges and asymmetries and imbalances that we should work with and try to mitigate those challenges. So, you know, in terms of biases, hallucinations, and all the typical problems of AI systems. So, like, everyone working in ICR will receive these challenges and will try to react against these challenges to mitigate them. This is one very, very important part of the job, I think. But there is a second part of the job which goes in the other direction, from ICR to AI, and we have much more power than we think to reshape the future of AI. I think everyone, all of us in the ICR communities, because nothing human happens without a narrative. Like, poetry can demolish any digital empire, to put it very quickly. I think already what we see now in the AI world, what is driving the development of new tools, the AI research and the AI governance, so regulations about AI, are all driven by narratives, pre-existing narratives. There are dominant narratives that have been introduced in many cases by the very tech players because it's in their interest. One of those narratives is the metaphor of the AI race. So we are all in a race. We have to hurry up. We shouldn't, you know, we should go into the train and arrive on time because otherwise another person will arrive first. And this is applicable to the private sector and also to the public sector. This is one narrative. The other narrative is the AI doom, like the danger of artificial general intelligence, superintelligence. These are all narratives. And narratives in general, like myths, are neither true nor false. They become worn out, they lose applicability, they become less useful, and I think they are not useful for ICR. We can create new narratives or feed new narratives that are much more beneficial for the cultural sectors. And this is not just a detail. This is very, very important. Like policymakers, they need new narratives, and they need to understand that another AI world is possible, and we can create it.
I wanted to pick up on Octavio's point about narratives and policymakers specifically, because I think that there's a lot of investment by major technology entities in the narrative that most of us do not know enough to influence what they're doing. We do not know enough to ask questions, right? So don't look behind the curtain. And that's just not true. And I think policymakers especially fall into that trap of, I'm not an AI expert, so let's bring in representatives from those tech companies to tell us how we should shape this policy. Please don't. You already know enough. All of us already know enough to ask questions, to demand clear answers, to be able to make choices and consent to how our information is used, right? And I think policymakers have an opportunity to make proactive policy based on community values and not based on technical specs that any developer could just build around, right? So saying you should build policy that provides sovereignty for individuals to remove their data from systems. That does not require that you know the technical specs of any given system that exists today or that exists in the future. You can build the policy on the values that protect community and individuals. And I think that's a place where often this exclusionary narrative around tech development shifts policymakers away from that. Martin, what would you add?
Well, I agree with you entirely, Amy, that there is a huge responsibility for policymakers to, take the opportunities that are there in regulating in this new environment and not leave it up to Silicon Valley and the big tech titans. But I think even beyond the policymakers, I think there is an opportunity for all of us, for civil society and for creative people in particular, to form those new narratives. And I'm going to say now something that seems like a contradiction, but I think these frontier technologies like AI were ultimately the result of such narratives, that some dreams dreamed up in science fiction were probably more powerful than the actual technological knowledge at the time. That just, the very term artificial intelligence that so many scientists say it's a misnomer, and the fantasy and the imagination behind it, what that even means, is probably propelled a lot of research and focused a lot of research into a certain direction. So I entirely agree with both of you. Narratives are important. They don't come, like from heaven, but we create them. They're ultimately human. And I think we need to also look at the kind of narratives that we will need to survive as a planet. And there, we need to be careful that we don't, in some ways, leave it up to certain special interests and, represented in a kind of very specific business model that, and in a very specific ideology, really based on utilitarianism, that Octavio described very, very well in the report. I'm not saying that it is that everything that in Silicon Valley is happening is wrong, or that there are not a lot of very thoughtful, smart people there. But it would be an impoverishment of humankind if we leave it up to that specific narrative that has been responsible for so many of the technological developments and do not take charge and control, as you know, with our different perspectives, with our different narratives, and create the kind of world we want, and the kind of world we also need to survive. So I entirely agree that a poetry can be sometimes, you know, can topple a government, or can have more impact even than you know, guns and money. And I think we need to indeed, as in international cultural relations, which I really see as creating the kind of mediators and the kind of environment where we empower creative people, where we empower artists to come forward with their imaginations, their narratives, and actually shape these new technologies to our needs.
Yeah, thank you all for your answers. I think you've provided kind of a great overview of different perspectives. And moving on to the next question, again from the audience, which I'd like to summarize. How can we make AI more sensitive to different cultural contexts?
I think a simple answer is to support those communities building the AI that they want and need, and not shaping AI to them. You know, it needs to be supported within the community, to be developed within the values, within the norms, within the content, within the stories of that community, and not, you know, I think there's probably lots of people on this webinar who maybe work for a nonprofit or an organization, and you've had to deal with that database where the field is labeled in a way that doesn't make sense for how you're using that label, but you're trying to force your content into this tool. That's not the best way to build technology, right? So if we want to think about what best serves community, especially for accountability to that community, it's supporting it from the start to be held there.
Okay, great. Maybe if we move on so that we can answer more questions. So there's one on digital humanism. So in the past, we spoke about transhumanism and its impact on humanity in general. And today it feels like digital humanism is replacing the old concept. So what does this term mean? What is characteristics and practices? I mean, perhaps Martin, you have something to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked into this concept of digital humanism as a kind of counterweight to transhumanism and to the kind of ideologies and narratives of Silicon Valley. I think that particularly when it comes to rights, to human rights, and to a general kind of lack of considerations of you know, this impact on the actual human lives, I think that digital humanism is a very useful concept, and we've also used it in our own work. I do also want to say that we need to be careful not to also look at the dark sides, you know, of humanism or of humankind. Ultimately, it is us humans who are responsible for what's going on with the planet. And so humanism is a bit of an ambivalent term. We also need to understand that it's not just humans that need to survive, but also non-human living organisms in order for us humans to survive. And therefore, I think that this concept is a good counterweight to really look at some of these a little bit problematic ideologies and narratives in Silicon Valley. But I also think that digital humanism itself is not the only response to some of the challenges we are looking at.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you. That was kind of very useful. And yeah, now I'd like to move on to and ask about the kind of importance on arts and culture and the role they play in the development of AI. I mean, this is something I'm curious about as a curator and somebody who works with a lot of artists in the space. And we've also had a question from the audience that is kind of particularly interested on artist collaborations and co-creations in the San Francisco area. and how they shape ICR.
Yeah, very, very briefly, I think that we have in our work tried to foster such collaborations. It's certainly something that artists are very interested in. There are also problems and challenges with having artists collaborate, for example, with tech companies. These projects of collaboration have to be thought through very, very well so that they don't become just PR for the companies. But a good way to do it is not just to have artists use the new tools, the new playthings, and show how great they are, but to actually be involved at a much earlier stage in the development of new tools. And ultimately, I see that artists having a huge potential in actually challenging, some of the assumptions, some of the conceptual frameworks with which these technologies are created in the first place.
I just was going to add one piece onto what Martin was saying as another example of artists' roles often making explaining things in ways that go beyond just words and helping folks understand the impacts, the bias, the mechanics of these systems through art in other ways where folks can experience or feel or understand how these systems may be working, how they might be using their information, how they could influence them through other experiences than a terms of service narrative that they might read.
Yes, and I also think that artists could become key players in AI development, not just being passive users of AI solutions. And especially if we take into account that the greatest scientists were also great artists, like Da Vinci was an artist, he was also inventing machines. This type of profile is needed now. So artists working in new technologies, in AI, developing new tools. And so I think a lot of collaboration and new skills are needed here.
Yes, definitely. And I think I probably have time for maybe one more question or so. And I noticed that we have another question in the audience on what might AI in the public interest look like, especially when it comes to creativity and applications in this industry.
Really briefly, I would say that I think it could look like lots of different things, but I do think that it's important that communities understand their opportunity to build shared infrastructure, and that it is not only states that are invested in shared infrastructure, and thinking about art and creativity as something, as part of a community's culture, and that it's important for that shared infrastructure to not only come from a state or a foundation.
Yeah, and I would just like to add to that, entirely agree. It should not only be states, and it should also not only be big private tech companies that currently dominate the public interest, the so-called public infrastructure of our discourse and of our information. Therefore, we need alternatives, whether this is community-based, whether this is public in the traditional state idea. But we need diversity of our public discourse, and we need diversity in the tools and forums and platforms where creativity can take place.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for all your answers. And unfortunately, it's 6 p.m. here in the UK and 7 p.m. in Germany. So I believe we have to draw to a close. And yeah, thank you very much to all the panelists, to Octavio for presenting the report, and Amy and Martin for joining with their perspectives. It's been, I think, really great to hear from everyone, and also to have a short discussion. And we could of course talk much more, but unfortunately we need to finish. And yeah, thank you all very much for joining this discussion from all over the world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.